you so much, sir. All right, breaking news coming in. Chinese President Xi Jinping is set to arrive in Moscow on May 7th for a 4-day official visit, coinciding with Russia's Victory Day celebrations on May 9th. And according to the Kremlin, on 8th May, Xi will meet with President Vladimir Putin to discuss the war in Ukraine, US influence, and to sign several bilateral agreements aimed at deepening the Russia-China strategic partnership. All right, well, tensions are once again spiking in the Russia-Ukraine front. The Kremlin has accused Kyiv of rejecting peace by continuing its drone attacks, even as President Putin's proposed 3-day ceasefire remains in place. Russia says it has not heard any official response from Ukraine on the offer, warning that any further strike will be met with immediate retaliation. Ukraine, meanwhile, claims its forces are still fighting inside Russia's Kursk region, despite Moscow insisting the incursion has been repelled. At least 3 civilians were reportedly killed in Ukrainian drone attacks near the border. Overnight, Ukrainian drones also targeted Moscow for the second consecutive day, forcing all 4 major airports in the capital to temporarily shut down. In response, Russia carried out strikes on Kharkiv, Odesa and Sumy, killing at least 4 people. The Russian military claims it intercepted over 100 drones across the country as both sides trade fire ahead of Russia's Victory Day. US President Donald Trump said that the ceasefire may not sound like much, but it's more than past efforts, and hinted both Moscow and Kyiv were now leaning towards a peace deal, citing recent drops in oil prices as a possible motivation. Let's listen into Trump's comments.
President Putin just announced a 3-day ceasefire, which doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot if you knew where we started. Russia, with the price of oil right now, oil's gone down. I think we're in a good position to settle. They want to settle. Ukraine wants to settle.
All right. Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst, is joining us at this point in time. He's in Taipei. Ross, always a pleasure having you. Well, it seems to, be pretty palpable and pretty apparent at this point in time that Ukraine not responding to Russia's overtures when it comes to peace is a big part of this problem. So far, the Ukrainians have been throwing in this sentimental victim card. But do you think that that's really the case?
Ukraine has said they're willing to agree to a 30-day ceasefire, which Russia is not willing to agree to. And Ukraine views any of these short-term proposals as basically meaningless. There was the Easter ceasefire, which both sides accused the other of not adhering to. And Ukraine, obviously, by their words and their actions, they see a 3-day ceasefire around Russia's Victory Day celebrations as pretty meaningless, because at the end of that period, Russia would just go back to doing what it's been doing. And we've seen just in the past day a number of attacks that did kill civilians in Ukraine, attacks by Russia that killed civilians in Ukraine. So it's kind of difficult to expect Ukraine to just agree to these Russian proposals without some kind of longer-term clear pathway, which is why Ukraine is willing to agree to a 30-day ceasefire, but they see these shorter-term offers by Russia as pretty much a gimmick.
Ross, this is obviously something that has escalated beyond a certain level of time and comfort. But Donald Trump has also been blowing hot and cold. There was a time when he was in fact campaigning for presidency, that he was quite confident that he will be able to, pick up the phone and call Vladimir Putin and end this war. Then came a time where meetings were held, with Zelensky in the White House, and we all remember that animated conversation between Donald Trump and Zelensky. It seems now that the Americans are losing interest in really becoming a part of any kind of a negotiation between these two. Who's supposed to do it, if not the Americans?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When the Trump administration took office on January 20th, ever since then, there's been, I think it's fair to call it a flurry of activity, of outreach to both sides, whether that's to Russia by sending Trump's special envoy, Witkoff, to meet with Putin several times, as well as ongoing direct discussions with Ukraine. But the United States has not gotten the two sides to agree to a longer-term ceasefire or anything that really approaches a real long-term ceasefire. And that's why in recent weeks we started to hear U.S. officials say that if there isn't progress, they're willing to walk away. The U.S. is willing to walk away from this process. And whose hands would that leave it in? I mean, the UN, we have to be very frank, the UN has been all but useless when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, and now it's been 3 years where the United Nations and its Secretary General have played nearly no role in bringing the two sides to a ceasefire. At times, there was talk of the involvement of other potential interlocutors. There was talk about Turkey, there was talk about China, there was even talk about Israel, and none of that has worked out. And the Western European countries, it seems, they can't play that role because their position is to support Ukraine, and they have frozen any contact with Russia. So your question is a good question, and it does seem that the United States at the moment is really the only country that can be an interlocutor between the two sides, and perhaps that's why we haven't seen the Trump administration walk away yet. They made that threat over the past couple of weeks, but they haven't implemented it yet. So as of the moment of this conversation, the good news is the Trump administration is still willing to play that role.
Absolutely right. Ross, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being here.